22-year-old me would think, like, still, like, seeing Michael Cullerine in the room, like, quite a few years later. It's just, like, unfathomable. Well, thank you all for coming today. As Mary pointed out, it's a gorgeous day out there, and I really appreciate your time with me. Also, just as a start, a sort of disclaimer for what I would be doing if I were in the audience and someone had one of your talks. Like 20 minutes after I eat anything, I'm like asleep in a room like this. So if anybody feels compelled to doze off, it's fine. It would be me if things were reversed. It's okay. What I want to do today is I want to address kind of four main topics, and that is what have we done at Madison College in the field of Southeast Asian Studies. Number two, what are the obstacles, what are the headwinds that kind of prevent us from doing more in that area? Number three, what are some ways that the Center for Southeast Asian Studies can help us navigate these kind of obstacles? And number four, as sort of something's going to be mixed through there, and that I encourage those of you who wish to do that. Looking around the room, and I'm not a professional bouncer, so I can't gauge people's age from looking at them, but I'm guessing we've got a few grad students in here. And so if you are a grad student and you're thinking about going on a community college path, feel free to ask questions. And in fact, this whole thing, one of the reasons I don't like using slides, and I talk is like a page and a third of handwritten notes, is so that I can encourage discussion throughout. So if you've got a question or you want me to go over something in a little more detail, just kind of throw a hand up, and as soon as I finish my thought, I'll look at you and you've got the floor. All right, so what have we done at Madison College? My colleague Jim Roseberry, as far as I can tell, pioneered our coursework in Southeast Asian history, and in fact much of our international studies lineup as well. Jim taught at MATC from 1979 to about 2005. Jim came out of UW-Madison in an economic history program, sort of a joint project of the economics and history departments. That was shut down in 1979. The university decided they didn't need that anymore, and Jim and several other people from that program at that point decided to abandon graduate school and come teach for us. The reason that Jim developed our Vietnam in America course is that he himself is a Vietnam War veteran. Jim had been involved in the anti-war movement at UC Berkeley, at Cal Berkeley, in the late 1960s, and upon graduation in 1970, he was drafted and spent his stint in the war on a Navy boat off the coast of South Vietnam. So Jim brought an angle to teaching history of the Vietnam War and Southeast Asian history that I lack. As someone born in 1967, I was too young to be drafted for that war, and therefore did not have experience with it. In fact, one of my earliest recollections of anything that we often call history, or certainly of that conflict, it would have been around April 30th, 1975, when we were on circle time on the floor, and my first grade teacher was reading us a story, and the principal came over the intercom and said that the last US helicopter had left Saigon. My first grade teacher emitted a loud sigh, and we all kind of asked Mrs. Feldman what's going on, and she said, ask your parents. It's the end of it. It's my whole Vietnam War memory right there. Jim obviously coming from a very different perspective. Jim accomplished great things with this course. He taught a couple of sections of it per semester. When he began teaching in the 1980s, a number of his students were themselves Vietnam War veterans, and they took his course kind of like Jim was teaching it to help sort of work out what their memories were, put them into some kind of context. Jim was also active and remains active especially in Vietnamese Buddhist community here in Madison. And so he left a great legacy for that when he retired. Initially, I looked at my own, I was offered the chance to teach the course. I declined. I don't speak Vietnamese. I took one semester of college French even, so even the colonizer language is kind of remote to me there. And so we offered it to a graduate student in comparative literature who focused on Southeast Asia named John Mattioli, who taught for us from about 2005 to 2008. John also did a great job bringing his literary background in and creating more of almost like a Southeast Asian studies approach to like a straightforward history approach. But, and this is going to be kind of a recurring theme in the talk here, while John was in the department, the comparative literature department went through some like really rocky times. And then finally, about 2008, they had a more secure framework in place. He had a new advisor for his dissertation who said it was time to finish. John looked at the demands of his job teaching for us and the demands in his other job, which was driving for Union Cab. And he ran the numbers and he said, you know, if I pick up one more night driving for Union Cab, I can make more than y'all pay me, and my fares aren't gonna like call me afterwards fetching about their grades. It was a fair point, you know, even though he left this, he gave us this news like in August, and he was scheduled to teach the following month. Couldn't really fault him. And I said, yup, you're totally in the right. Tell that to my dean, and there's nothing we can do about it, but people ought to know. So it was at that point that my dean approached me and said, listen, you know, can you teach this class? And I thought about it, and I contacted friends of mine who work in Asian studies, and I was like, you know, I'm an Americanist, I don't speak Vietnamese, and so forth. Is it okay? And they said, how big is your history department? And I said, well, 3 full-time people. And they're like, yeah, it's fine. This happens all the time. So based on that, I took the course over beginning in 2008 and taught it until 2020 when we've kind of put it on pause due to falling enrollments, which is a topic I'll be getting to, again, another one that we come throughout. In the 1990s, we taught a course, a general like Intro to Asian Studies class. That course was developed and taught by a part-time faculty member, Lamont Colucci, who taught at Memorial High School and eventually went on into a brief career in the State Department, working in the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, South Korea, and then returned, and I think he's now teaching political science at Ripon College. Lamont's class also was one that was constantly on the bubble of running or not running. Our criteria at Madison College, as at many colleges, both 2- and 4-year, is if we get 10 people to show up, then we can run it, and if we don't get 10, it's usually dropped unless there's some other extenuating circumstance. So our Asian history course was always right on that bubble, you know, 10 students one semester, 12 students, 7 students, running and not running. From 2009 to 2012, we also offered a course, like an introduction to Buddhism through our philosophy department, developed and taught by another part-time instructor, James Powell, who came in. He had taught that course in graduate school. It was a great idea. During that period of time, we had a rise in the number of students who were interested in religious studies of all things, so it was a good match to some things we offered elsewhere. But Jim left us for a full-time position at UW-Rock County. No one else in the philosophy department had a background in Buddhism, and so that course dropped as well. So obviously, some of the recurring challenges in here have been finding qualified teachers. There are relatively few people who go through the trouble of mastering a Southeast Asian language, immersing themselves in Southeast Asian language, culture, and history, who then choose to take a job at a 2-year college. We've gone with part-time faculty members, people, you know, current graduate students who are finishing their dissertations, people who left graduate school before completing and are teaching with us. But again, that's contingent labor. On top of the usual contingencies of teaching at my college, and this is something that varies at 2-year colleges around the country, I don't have tenure. So while until 2011, I guess 2014, when the last real contract expired, I had the power of a strong union in my background. Now we, like all state employee unions in Wisconsin, we're basically the United Orphans and Widows in terms of what we can do union-wise. We can bargain our contract up to the cost of living increase and no other issues beyond that. And if our administrators decide not to go with that, we have no recourse. So that precariousness is magnified by part-time faculty who work on semester-to-semester contracts and who really don't know, in many cases, right up until like the week before classes start, is their class actually going to run or not, if that class is down around the 10-student mark. So that's been a huge problem for us. Also, a student demand, and this is one of the challenges. It's kind of a long one here, so just kind of bear with me for a minute while I get into the weeds of academic advising, which is something else I do. And this is legit a tangent, so I'm going to stand over here for a minute. I promise I'll be back on Southeast Asian Studies in a moment. but this is important context. So one of the things I do a great deal of that I feel is really critical in a community college setting is advising, is helping my students navigate the pathway from whatever colleges or high school backgrounds they came from to MATC and then going on to whatever college they transfer to. Obviously, this college right here is the choice destination for a majority of our students. 40% roughly end up transferring here. Another 40% transfer to like 5 other UW four-year schools and Edgewood College, and then another 20% transfer to other colleges around the country and around the world. So it's a lot of individual work. And one of the things that's happened over the course of my career there is that, of course, the cost of college has risen by a great deal. You all know this. Financial aid has not exactly kept up with that, and I'd contend in many cases financial aid is almost punitive, that you have to maintain the ability to sort of experiment with courses in different areas and try out different majors in different pathways gets really reduced if you're on financial aid and starting your career at a community college. Now, we've tried to respond to this. We've developed 7, and I believe starting this fall, 8 pre-majors for students. So students who have a definite direction can choose a pre-major and they'll get through efficiently and within the bounds of what financial aid offers and so forth. And I'm the coordinator of the Arts and Humanities pre-major. Arts and Humanities, it's awesome. Really anything goes. It's very easy to navigate. The hardest thing for students is making all the choices they have. However, I was just at a meeting this morning. The meeting I had before this was an advising meeting about our brand new major for students who want to go into a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing. It's a classic community college degree. It's high demand. There's jobs available. It's high paying, etc. Here's the thing. My colleague who directs that pre-major, and she talked to me about this ahead of time, and I was initially kind of offended, but I came around to why this is. She tells her students, do not take history classes, because nursing schools want their students to have 3 social science courses, 2 psychology classes, and an intro sociology. In order for students to get through most efficiently, it's often recommended that they take a literature class that fulfills our literature requirement and their ethnic studies at the same time, leaving out ethnic studies in other areas. And their elective credits are often taken up with remedial coursework that the students need that we offer and counts for financial aid, but does not actually transfer to four-year colleges. This leaves virtually no room for students to explore areas like Southeast Asian studies or Asian studies more generally. And so I contend this is one of the big challenges that all of us who are interested in these initiatives are up against, is how do we manage to get Southeast Asian studies onto the menu? How do we develop courses that will fit these increasingly narrow niches for students in pre-professional programs, which is a majority of our students? Historically, community college students tend not to major in area studies, in history, in sociology, in anthropology, in political science, and the other fields that you all represent. They tend to major in nursing, they tend to major in elementary education, they major in business, they major in engineering, majors that have a much more direct career trajectory. So working Asian studies and Southeast Asian studies into that bigger picture is a huge challenge. I recognize it's probably like that everywhere. I would imagine that there are similar impulses at a university like UW, where I know, what I read the other day, like there are more students in the computer science program than there are in all the humanities programs combined for undergrads. But it's that much more acute because we're much more dependent on numbers of students coming in. We don't have endowments to fall back on. It's harder for us to secure grants and scholarships to keep programs going, etc. Okay, tangent over. Thanks for sticking with me. Other problems we've had have been sort of internal processes. We had, some of you may know, Lynn Lupkeman, who came out of UW Madison. She taught for us for a year, was in line for a permanent position where we thought that we could use her background in Chinese history to help broaden our Asian studies offerings. She made it to the final round of hiring. She was the pick of our hiring committee, and our college, in its infinite wisdom, installed someone in that job who had not even applied for it. Someone who had threatened to sue because he didn't get a different position, and they gave him the history position as a second prize. He's still with us. He's not an Asian studies specialist. He's a political theorist with a specialist in Anglo-American political theory, so no. In 2019, working with Mary and the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, Mary made us aware of grants that the center receives through the State Department that are set up deliberately to encourage the study of Southeast Asia at community colleges. A colleague of mine used money from that grant to buy students in her women's history class copies of a textbook that she was able to give them for free. I used that money to buy myself some research time to increase the content about Hmong history and the contemporaneous secret war, along with the Vietnam War era that I taught, that I've been teaching for years. In line with my initiative, I wanted our library to take advantage of funds that they could use, a couple $1,000s to buy books on Hmong history and Southeast Asian history in general. I talked to the librarians who handle history purchases, and they were enthusiastic, and they said, we've got to run it by our boss, who did not dignify their request with a response. It was just a no. And I said, we're giving you like $2,000 worth of books. You can select them and so forth. No. Can I ask why? Also no. So, not sure why that is. It's been a few years. Toward the end of that process is when we were starting to learn about COVID, so perhaps it got lost in the shuffle of trying to transition over to accommodate an epidemic that we didn't know what it was. We're going to try it again, and hopefully we'll have better results this time around. So one thing to consider as looking ahead at future collaborations and way that the Center for Southeast Asian Studies or other area studies centers can collaborate with us in ways that will actually increase our program and work within the mission, is to remember that our main function as a technical college, and again, oops, brief tangent here, sorry, go this way, it's a different tangent. But one of the things that's unusual about Wisconsin is we're one of two, or possibly the only state currently, that has two-year college systems. We have the UW two-year colleges, which themselves are shrinking even worse than we are. Two-year colleges attached to four-year institutions at UW, so UW Whitewater at Rock County, UW Platteville at Sauk County, etc. If you've traveled around Wisconsin, if you've lived in small towns in Wisconsin, you may have seen some of these, you may have attended one yourself. So that's the two-year college system that focuses on the liberal arts. And historically, the technical college system focuses on two-year degrees that put people directly into jobs. Two-year accounting degrees for bookkeepers, degrees in the building trades, degrees in auto repair and cosmetology, and so forth. This is changing a little bit. Just recently, the Wisconsin Tech College system, schools across the board, and not just the original ones here in Madison and Milwaukee and in Rhinelander, colleges across the Wisconsin Tech College system have now gotten the authority to offer liberal arts coursework, courses that will transfer to four-year colleges. So perhaps one way to, oh wait, I'm back on topic. One way for this group to focus on that is to identify the tech college districts around the state that serve the most Hmong and Southeast Asian students. That I think beyond Madison and Milwaukee, the historic centers of liberal arts education in the tech college system, if you checked out the North Central in Wausau, if you checked out Chippewa Valley in Eau Claire, maybe Lakeshore in Sheboygan, given the communities that they serve, they might be more receptive than they were in the past to going along with some sort of Hmong studies initiative or broader initiatives in Southeast Asian studies. Worth a shot at least. So our main area is we serve area industry, and historically the liberal arts kind of get short shrift. When I started there at MATC in 1998, I was told we weren't even supposed to publicize that we offered liberal arts transfer courses, that there was some bad blood about that back in the early 70s that my senior colleagues had been around for, and they said, just keep it under your hat. There was an event when my older son was in middle school, or a college wanted to, came around to realize that programs like the People program here at UW that started reaching out to students who showed some kind of interest or potential in going to college, that it's important to start reaching out to students like in middle school, especially if their parents didn't go to college ahead of them. And so thinking about this idea, we got a mass email to the faculty asking us to go into middle schools and talk to students. And I was like, awesome, I have a kid in middle school, this will be great. As you all are seeing today, the most dangerous place in any room is between me and a hot microphone. So yeah, I could totally get up at a middle school gym and talk to people about the virtues of my college. And so I contacted the person who was in charge of this, and I said, yeah, my kids are at Hamilton Middle School in Madison, and I want to do this. And she said, fantastic, what program are you in? And I said, I'm in liberal arts transfer. And she's like, oh, not you. This is 2-year programs. And I'm like, well, but like a lot of other people I know are like kind of snobby about MATC, and they kind of like, they might send their kids there if they knew how good we were, but they're kind of, and the answer was like, not you, okay? So I feel like that is changing now, but that is definitely, I think there are elements of that that are still at play that kind of prevent us from thinking in terms of ourselves as colleges that are preparing students to understand the world as a traditional liberal arts education should be doing. The global awareness aspect of higher education is kind of a tough sell by us. One of the kind of smaller little gigs I had at Madison College was working as an international education fellow for a year back in 2011, working under Jeff Bradshaw, who Mary mentioned before. Jeff asked me to compose a survey for the advisory boards of our 2-year programs, asking them about their international education needs. I, an international education supporter and somewhat naive about the nature of Wisconsin business, thought this is going to be great. We're going to get all this validation for language training and cultural training and study abroad experiences and so forth. And the responses we got back ranged from, we don't have any international clients, why are you asking us this, to, can you teach your students not to call our customers nasty names? And I'm like, well, kinda, but it's not exactly international education on either of those. Furthermore, from the student end, I've done some work with a consortium of 2-year colleges that we belong to. And at many of our colleges, they struggle with study abroad. They struggle with international experience in general. That a lot of our students come from fairly small insular towns, and the idea of traveling abroad is just, they don't understand the value of it. They're scared of it. They're concerned about the time away, the expense and so forth, the credits transfer and so on. And so international education is generally a tough sell. In point of fact, talking with colleagues at Kishwaukee Community College in Illinois, in Rock Valley, and in Rockford, and elsewhere, we actually do a pretty good job. We actually have a study abroad program. Students actually go. But it's not a huge number. It's not nearly as many, not as many students interested in international experiences as you have at a 4-year college like this. Furthermore, we don't have an international studies requirement. There are colleges that do. I know UW-Platteville, one of our main transfer partners, does. That's something we might adopt. Then we have to jettison something else because our credits go on the a la carte system instead of the sort of all-you-can-eat system that you've got here. If you're taking a 4-credit class, then that costs 25% more than the 3-credit class does. So if you're a full-time student, at a university like UW, if you're between like 12 and 18 credits, it's the same tuition. With us, like 18 credits, that's 50% more expensive. So we have to watch our credits very closely and our requirements very closely. There's pressure for us to kind of keep our associate degree requirement at a firm 60 credits and not really add to that. Finally, historically, we're kind of a follower and not an innovator. I've done a little bit of work on our college's history and during the upheavals of the 1960s here in Madison, which you may have heard about. It's basically our brand. MATC internal publications, talks by administrators, etc., prided our students on not being out there in the streets. While UW students are out there in the streets, we handle the tech end. We are behind the scenes. We are not visible in that way. This is starting to change a little bit. Our college's interest in better connecting to the increasingly diverse communities that we serve is getting advice from our administrators about really being a leader and being out in front of things and challenging what we've always done. Culturally, this is honestly an uphill battle for us. UW is great at that. I love reading, reading stories about like UW going up against the state legislature and stuff like that. I love to see it. Like, we never do that. We're scared of that culturally. So where I think this follower thing works in, and this is kind of my segue toward potential opportunities for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies and other area studies centers here, is that if you tell us you need something, if you can establish to us that you as an outside agency are counting on us to do X, and it would be really great if we did X, we have a better chance of doing X. Part of the ways that I've gotten release time from teaching and other kinds of perks along the way is outside partners at the UW and other colleges saying, hey, we need this person to do something for us. When I have an idea where I say, hey, I'd like to, go off and do this thing, and I need to, it's going to benefit the college, it's going to be a short-term hit to my teaching and so forth, the answer is generally, LOL, no. But when someone from outside says, hey, we need faculty for this thing, we're much more receptive. So don't be afraid to do that. If you've got an idea or you think we might be a useful partner, reach out to us, tell us that you need our help, and that could kind of move the needle on things. All right. Other opportunities, more specifically for this center and others, to boost the international education offerings in my college. First of all, I think that continuing work with Jeff and the Center for International Education is fantastic. As much as there are as few internationally focused courses that we have, and as few students often take them, Jeff's center has grown by leaps and bounds since I've been there. I mean, just looking at office space, they started out, my gosh, they were in a room that was it was about the size of, you take this door here, and we're about Mary is sitting and come back, and it was a little smaller than that, it stopped about here. So it was a tiny little room, and now they're on the first floor, they've got high visibility, they've got a whole office suite, they're growing by leaps and bounds. Our college is interested in maintaining these connections, I think, even if we aren't quite sure how to do it, and even though we don't have a great deal of historical experience making those kind of connections. So partnership work that you get, anything like that, fantastic, keep bringing it our way. The Hmong Studies Partnership that Mary mentioned, and many of you probably know about, I find this really fascinating. It's the first academic initiative I'm aware of that's had significant community input. We've got partners in the Madison's Hmong community who are helping us kind of chart the shape of what is this class going to look like? What is this program going to look like? And I think that sort of community involvement also, that is the communities that we serve, just like the industries that we serve, these are agents who we listen to. That when there's community demand, when there's community buy-in, when there's community input, that's something that our leadership will take notice of. I think also the funding is a huge part of it. We would not be offering first 2 semesters of Mandarin and Arabic at my college if it weren't for grants that have come in from area studies at UW, sending graduate students over there to take those courses. Even so, they're a bit of an uphill climb for people to wrap their heads around. Just yesterday, I was part of an exchange about a student who was trying to decide between Spanish and Arabic that was on a Teams chat of people who do advising. And the advisors were saying, well, it's just easier to do Spanish. We've got more sections and the transfer is a little less, hard to explain and so forth. Not keeping in mind that you can legit get paid to take Arabic in college. There's huge demand for that. It's easier, so that's where we kind of default. If we can work together to make things easy for our students, I think we can see growth in these areas. And finally, just to reiterate a point I've been making, tell us what you want. Tell us stuff you think we might be able to do. As I've said before, I think this is, it's one of the things I find kind of odd about my college sometimes, is I think my sense of college was formed by my time at Michigan, working for Mike, by my grad school years here at UW, as we're the faculty, damn it, we know what's going on. We've got ideas, we want to put them into action. And that doesn't fly so well at my college, but what does is when outside agents come in and say, hey, we think you'd be a good partner. Can you help us out with this? We are open to those conversations, and those are initiatives we're more likely to take on more than relying on me and my colleagues to generate things spontaneously that will actually get legs and take off and grow. So tell us what you want, and we'll see what we can do. Hearing that kind of demand, I think, will be great, a great way for us to move forward, both in Southeast Asian studies and area studies more generally. All right, I know there's another group coming in, so I'm going to wrap up a few minutes early. Happy to take your questions.